I get it. You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through drone videos, wondering if the next big purchase will finally give you that cinematic edge without turning your wallet into a black hole. The fear of splurging on a machine that sounds amazing on paper but ends up sitting in a closet is real, especially when you're juggling work projects, weekend hikes, and the occasional family get-together. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. And in the next few minutes I'll walk through why the DJI Mavic 4 Pro Fly More combo might be the sweet spot you've been hunting for, or why it could be a misstep for your particular workflow. First off, the Mavic 4 Pro isn't just another drone. It's the first in DJI's lineup to bundle a 100-megapixel Hasselblad sensor with a 6K per 60 frames per second HDR video pipeline, and it does that while still fitting into the same foldaway form factor you've come to expect from the Mavic family. That kind of resolution sounds impressive, but the real test is how it behaves when you actually point it at a subject. In bright daylight, the camera's large sensor captures a richness of color and detail that lets you pull massive crops in post without looking like you've blown up a pixel. I tried it on a sunny ridgeline during a sunrise shoot, and the resulting stills kept the sky gradients smooth while the foreground rocks stayed razor sharp. For a creator who needs to extract stills from video footage or produce high-resolution prints for clients, that extra detail can translate into higher rates or more compelling portfolios. If you're more of a video-first storyteller, the 6K per 60 frames per second HDR stream is where the Mavic 4 Pro starts to justify its price tag. The 10-bit HDR transmission over DJI's O4 Plus link lets you see a near-real time preview that's surprisingly true to the final output. When I was filming a drone follow sequence for a short travel documentary, the live view on the 7-inch rotatable remote showed me the exact exposure roll-off I'd get in the final edit, meaning I could nail my lighting decisions on the fly. That kind of confidence saves you hours in post-production, especially when you're dealing with high dynamic range scenes like a bustling cityscape at dusk. Now, let's talk about autofocus. Earlier Mavic models sometimes left you guessing whether the subject would be locked in or drifting out of focus as you moved the drone. The Mavic 4 Pro's autofocus system feels markedly more decisive. It locks onto subjects within a second or two, even when you're swinging between a foreground tree line and a distant mountain. In practice, that means you can set up a moving shot, say, a runner cutting through a forest trail, and trust the camera to stay tack sharp without you having to manually refocus every few seconds. For hobbyists who love spontaneous run-and-shoot sessions, that's a game-changer. Low-light performance is another area where the Mavic 4 Pro pulls ahead of its predecessors. DJI touts a 0.1 lux nightscape omnidirectional obstacle sensing system, and while the obstacle sensors themselves are more about safety, the sensor's ability to operate in near-dark conditions also hints at how the camera handles low-light scenes. I tested it on a moonlit beach, and the footage retained a surprisingly clean image with minimal noise, especially when I cranked the ISO to 6400. The dual-tail lenses helped, too, by allowing tighter framing without sacrificing clarity, which is something you'll appreciate if you're shooting nighttime cityscapes where you need both wide context and detailed subjects. Stabilization has always been DJI's strong suit, and the 360 Infinity gimbal on this model lives up to that reputation. The 3-axis system handles abrupt wind gusts with a smoothness that feels almost surgical. When I was filming a windy day at a coastal cliff, the gimbal kept the horizon locked perfectly, and the footage didn't exhibit the jitter you sometimes see with cheaper drones. That stability is crucial for professional creators who need footage ready for broadcast without having to spend time in a software stabilizer. Battery life is another practical concern. DJI advertises a 51-minute flight time, and in real-world testing I was able to get close to 45 minutes of usable flight before the battery hit its safeland threshold. That's a noticeable bump over the previous generation's 30-minute ceiling. For anyone who spends a full day on location, that extra endurance means fewer battery swaps and more time capturing. The Fly More combo includes 3 spare batteries, a charging hub, and a carrying case, which together make the logistics of a multi-hour shoot far less stressful. On the flip side, there are a few practical weaknesses to keep in mind. The remote controller, while a solid piece of hardware with a bright, rotatable display, adds a noticeable amount of bulk to your kit. If you're a pure backpack-only traveler, that extra weight might feel like a compromise compared to a phone-based controller setup. The menu system, despite being polished, can still feel a bit dense for absolute beginners. You'll find yourself scrolling through layers of options to set up custom flight modes, and while the UI is intuitive after a few flights, the learning curve isn't negligible. If,